I'm telling you right now that you guys are lucky not bothering being on boards, because I serve in several boards, and the interesting part that happened to people is I said something and the other fellow said differently, and then we go back last month, and then we go back 2 months ago, and then that person said it, I said that, it can be, and then you pull out the minutes. Why I'm saying that? It's because what we're going to discuss is a situation of uncertainty. So if it's a board meeting, it's a little entertaining, but if it's our sugya, we're talking about difference in time. People come and give a bear witness, and sometimes those witnesses, it's crucial for making decisions. In our discussion can be a life decision of a person. Cases like murder we discussed yesterday, it's those who bring testimony for that purpose are crucial, especially if it's some type of contradiction between the witnesses. So we are here on page 12, top of the page. Azal Rav Huna Brei de Rav Yuda Amra Leshma Tei Kamei de Rabba Amar Uma Ilu Daikinen Behanesadei והיידה כאמר 3 בתחילת 3 והיידה כאמר 5 בסוף 5 והביה עדות מוכחשת ולא קטלינה וענן נקום ונקטיל מספיקה. He said, look, if we are very scrupulous, we go to the bottom, we want to understand, when these people bear a testimony, they said, we saw this type of action, this type of event at the 3rd hour. And when a person said the 3rd hour, he meant to say the beginning. Remember, the beginning of the 3rd hour. Or if person used, the other fellow used the term of 5th hour, he meant to say the end of the 5th hour. Remember, this is the beginning of the 3rd hour, this is the end of the 5th hour. So it means that between the two witnesses, it's a difference of 3 hours. Again, Mr. Reuven came in and he said the 3rd hour. And our assumption can be that he speaks about the beginning of the 3rd hour. Mr. Shimon came in and he speaks about the 5th hour. And I understand the 5th hour meaning the end of the 5th hour. So we are no longer speaking about 2 hours, we're talking here about 3 hours. So therefore, if it is 3 hours, it's really a disputation. It's in a way, it's a contradiction between the two. It's a far way, and we call it edut mucheshet, which means this type of a situation. It's way too far. Abaye tells us that if people make mistake, we are talking statistic of average. It apply maybe for an hour, but if it's 3 hours, we cannot go ahead and put a person in an electrical chair or in ancient time an execution for this huge difference between the two witnesses when it's come close to a 3 hours distance. So how that can be that the court go further and put someone in execution punishment while it's all in a state of uncertainty. So V'rachmana Amar, one of the things that we call Torah, we call it Rahmana. It's like in Arabic too, it meaning God full of compassion. The Torah is a Torah of compassion. In our religion, we are very careful when it's come to execution. We need to go through a long process of interrogation and more before you're making decisions. And the Torah said in the book of Bamidbar, book of Numbers, chapter 35, Veshaftu ha'edah vehitzilu ha'edah and the Bet Din have the obligation to not only to judge, but also to rescue, which means the Bet Din has the obligation to try their very best to find something that a person get away from execution. So I think I referred to you several times what the rabbis tells us, that again is a language of exaggeration. They say that at the time that they have a Bet Din and they have the Bet Din, those authorities, if the Bet Din put someone in a execution was once in a 70 year, one in a 70 years, it's considering a murderer Bet Din, because we are extremely striving not to do it. Lehavdil is no comparison, but just to conceptualize my statement, state of Israel, the modern Israel, how many years? It's about 65 years, right? How many cases in Israel since the beginning? You know of execution? It's only one case, which is the יימח שמו Eichmann, the Nazi murderer, mass murderer. And with that said, after the Mossad brought him from Argentina and all that, it took a long time before they did it. They have all these people that is fresh survivors that testified, etc., etc., to make sure that it's him, to make sure that it was this evil man, the Manyuk, that they caught the Ukrainian murderer. And even it was several people that testified that he was the evil Ivan, if you remember. Still, he get out because it was not 100% clear that it's him by some measure of the court. So you see here, back to our subject, that we try to compare the two witnesses. And if it's a something like 3 hours, we assume that someone is not truthful. That's what Rabbeinu David, the famous interpretation, tell us. So we said either they're untruthful or people are making a mistakes, they're incorrect in their measurement. I saw the other day a fellow who drove a car on Forest Drive, and he passed a school bus while the school bus opened the stop sign. And the police stopped him. And I was about to get to the savory store, so it was I was passing while they have the conversation. So he claimed that he is in a state of a daydream. In other words, he didn't do it on purpose. He have all these clear whatever years he's driving, but he says that he didn't conceptualize that situation. Whatever the outcome, the point is people sometimes imagine things that not necessarily correct. So it can be either untruthful statement or imaginations. And by that we have to be careful, because here you're talking again over execution of a person. So he said, אלא אמר רבא לדברי רבי מאיר טועה 2 שעות חסר משהו, לדברי רבי יהודה טועה 3 שעות חסר משהו. Here is the difference. We continue with this disputation between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda. By Rabbi Meir, people can make a mistake between the 2 and the 3 hours, which means when they use the term 3 hours, meant to say a little, it's like 2 hours and something, 2 and some hours. According to Rabbi Yehuda, if someone said the 3rd hour or used the 5th hour, they meant to say 3 hours and something. So you see here, since you see that it's a common mistake between the two people, and because you see such a distance, you have to give the people a benefit of doubt, which means you have to say that it's applied to what? To a common mistake, unwritten mistake, and not exaggeration of the truth. Now Rava elaborate of his words. He said, לדברי רבי מאיר אדם טועה 2 שעות חסר משהו מעשה כי הווה. according to Rabbi Meir, that said that one of the witnesses said it's applied to 2 hours, and one said in the 3 hours, and their witnesses is valid, it applied even we said that they testified over a situation that happened either beginning of the 2 hours or at the end of the 3 hours. So again, what's the distance? If the beginning of the second or the end of the third is about what? Less than 2 hours, is an hour and something, okay? Now, after you interrogate them, I remember once I served in the Miluim, in the reserve, in the Gesher Allenby, in Allenby Bridge, which is between Jordan and Israel. And we work with the intelligence, with the security service at that time. So one of the things we need to do is the interrogation of all kind of situation. So the way you interrogate people, one of the things, you have several people and you need to go deep down to see if it's any contradiction between the people. You separate them and you interrogate them to hear what's going on, because it was a borderline between Israel and Jordan. So I personally learned at that time that when you do interrogation, that's exactly what he said here, that it's not necessarily people are untruthful. People sometimes making mistakes. They get so frightened or so confused that they're making human mistakes. It's not that always they're untruthful. So he said here, so therefore that people make a mistake, but it's not that you find here a false testimony when you make a cross-examination. בדברי רבי יהודה, אדם טועה 3 שעות חסר משהו. According to Rabbi Yehuda, a person can make a mistake with 3 hours minus something. מעשה כהווה. So here we have a very beautiful Rashi, and Rashi here does something that it's very rare. Rashi used the word כלומר twice. So I explain in my book, ביאורי הכלומר ברש"י על הש"ס, the explanation of the מעשה כהווה twice. In short, the big question here, we don't have the time, the big question here is how far you go with this interrogation, and how far you can determine when it's come to a distance. When you use the term at the end of the 3rd hour or at the beginning of the 2nd hour, Rashi was basically disturbing the language the Gemarrah used. So what Rashi tried to tell us in an explanation here, he used the word klomar to tell us that it's something that missing, and he tried to say that when you do this cross-examination and you go deeper, especially when it's come to potential execution of people, both parties are extreme careful, which is the people who bear witnesses. They know the responsibility of their statements, and the people who make the interrogation. Now, here is the problem. Remember yesterday we talked about situation, you walk in a giant store and suddenly you look around and you don't remember why you are there. You open the refrigerator and you don't remember why you opened the refrigerator. You call somebody and the person said hello and you don't remember whom you called. It happens to people, unfortunately. That's the way it is, right? So when you have these witnesses that come and bear witness, and it's not necessarily that they are untruthful, it happens to people that they get confused, they get a daydream, they get all kind of forgetfulness, or they are, and now you have an issue of executing the person just by merely the fact that there's a distance in time between the two witnesses. So that's what we said, או בתחילת 3 או בסוף 5. Either it's the beginning of the 3rd hour or the end of the 5th hour. ואחד מן היקטעי 3 שעות חסר משהו. In short, what they try to tell us is up to 2 hours we can accept the idea that Reuven and Shimon have distance between the two. If you're exceeding more than 2 hours, you have an issue. You have an issue that you are talking a life of a person, and therefore you cannot accept it if it's exceeded more than 2 hours. So now we back to the Machlokes and we go deeper. Now you see a beautiful sugya. It's based on the Sanhedrin, Tractate Sanhedrin, page 40. They said, Tnan, היו בודקים אותו בשבע חקירות. They interrogate that person 7 different interrogations, seven times. Now, why they use the term 7? It means that the examination has to be very deeply there. So 7 apply to what? We have a private detective here, he will tell us. 7 means? So 7 basically apply to 7 type of questions that you challenge that person, which means 7 questions. So it's applied to the Bet Din. Rashi tells us that in order for them to go ahead and execute someone, they need to file 7 type of question in their process of interrogation. They need to know the time, the place, they need to know the circumstance. Now we should be aware that this type of interrogation apply Dinei Nefashot in a case of execution, and sometimes also in a monetary disputation. Sometimes.
Usually in criminal cases. Usually in capital cases.
Capital cases. Okay. So they said, that many attorneys will tell you that based on their mind of thinking, it's based on a Talmudic way of thinking. Yeah. Many attorneys will tell you. Anyway,
because of the analytical
analytical thinking. Number 1, be'ezo shavua. Shavua doesn't mean week here. It's applied to the 7 years of sabbatical year, which means since sabbatical years every 7 years, and then 7 times 7 we have Jubilee. So and the Jubilee, by the way, Tosfot said in Gittin that's applied only when the Jewish people are dwell in the land of Israel. It's in the Gittin 36. Tosfot said it. That's not apply in the regular time. By us, we don't do it because of biblical time. But anyway, they ask in the cycle of sabbatical of Shemitah, which cycle of the 7 times 7 cycle, which year on those cycle, which cycle you're talking about. So for example, since you have how many cycles? We have 7 times 7. So which cycle of the 7 that happened? Question 2. Be'ezo shana. So since we talk about a specific year, so now we ask which year of that cycle you are speaking about. Okay. Number 3, be'eze chodesh, what month? Bechama b'chodesh, what day? Be'eze yom, is that applied to an our language? Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday? What is it? What day? Be'ezo sha'a, and what hour? So there's a machloket rishonim, is a disputation among the early sages, if b'diavad, if in some circumstance you can shorten the procedure. For example, if you said it was last Friday at 7:40 in the morning, right? So you basically shorten it. Be'eze makom, what location? Which means, do you know the deceased? Did you warn him? How do you see him being killed? By what? By a knife? By spear? By, in our language, by gun? His garment, they go to details. His garments was what? Black? Was white? What exactly the color? So it means over there the Mishnah tells us, Rashi quoted some part of the Mishnah, they wanted to go to the bottom of the details. They want to get the picture clear. Utnan ma ben chakirot libdikot. There are 2 types of interrogation. One, it's called chakira, which means that regular examination, and there they have bdika. Bdika in simple language is like some type of search. So what's the difference? If אמר אחד מהם איני יודע עדותן בטלה, if someone display equanimity, which means someone is play it acquiesce, he plead the Fifth Amendment. So now what happened? All the testimony is kaput. It's over. Why? Because we have to have a cross-examination. We have to have clear information. So that's applied to חקירות. בדיקות, they search to the bottom, אפילו שניהם אומרים אין אנו יודעים עדותם קיימת. Even both of them answer one of the question, I don't know, it's still valid. Meaning, if you look at the court system, how they do a cross-examination, so as long as one witness, let's talk about Reuven and Shimon, as long as Shimon did not say something that it's opposite of what Reuven said and vice versa, as long as we are not in that state, they are still considering a valid, even in some question they said we don't know. Vehavinan ba, and now we go to understand it deeply. They follow the Tractate Sanhedrin, page 41b. The reason for that is vehavinan ba, ma yishna chakirot u'ma yishna bdikot. What the way are interrogations different, and in what way are examinations different? What's the difference between interrogation and examination? So they said, ואמרינן חקירות, אמר אחד מהם אני יודע, עדותן בדלה, והביא עלי עדות שאתה יכול להזימה. בדיקות, עדות שאתה יכול להזימה היא. Very simple. When it's come to testimony over the interrogation, so if one said, I don't know, their testimony is void. And the other, why? Because it's considering as the testimony that you cannot render as false. Because any witnesses that you accepted, you have to have a way to have a cross-examination in order to make it invalid. The whole idea of having a defender and persecuted in both sides in order to have a cross-examination and find some fault in one of the statements. However, when it's come to other way around, if it's you do a typical examination, if they do not know one of the answers, it's considering the testimony you can render false, conspiring testimony, and therefore even without that detail, the second pair of witnesses can still testify that the first pair of witnesses was with them in a different place at that time, for example, and therefore it's all considering conspiring testimony. That's happening, unfortunately, that you have a pair of witnesses and then you have the second pair that said, what are you talking about? You are with us in different location at that time. Ve'i amart taye inish kulehai. And if you said that the person make a mistake so much, which means it happened that people make mistake in several hours, what do you mean by that? Someone said, for example, it was 7 in the morning, and another person said it's 9 in the morning. So חקירות דאיזו שעה נמי. What exactly hour are you talking about? He says, עדות שאתה יכול להזימה היא דאמרי מתאי קטעינן. So this is considering a testimony that you cannot render as false. Conspires testimony for if other witnesses claim that they are elsewhere at that time, so the witness can say we are mistaken. So the minute they say that we are mistaken, such as an example that they made a mistake in the 5th hour, and then the others came in and says 5th hour, we are at that time sitting at Starbucks and chatting. What are you talking about? Why are you saying 5th hour? So it may be the 4th hour, and they're mistaken the time. So therefore, if he said the time, it's very hard to show that they are wrong. So it's basically the opposite what we said earlier. So they said when it's come to an hour, the avinalu kulu ta'u taihu, so that you give the first pair of witnesses the chance to make mistake, which means the second pair can show that the first pair is conspiring testimony, because they show that at that time they are with them at that time, and therefore it's like we depend upon the second one. And Rabbi Meir ya'avin לנו מתחילת שעה ראשונה. So according to Rabbi Meir, that said that the person make a mistake on 2 hours, so we go by the first hour of the day ad sof chamesh, until the end of the 5th hour. So when one of the witnesses said that the event happened at the 2nd hour, we give him the benefit of doubt. We still trust him up to a time measurement of 2 hours. So you give him the first and the 2nd hour together with the 3rd hour and the 4th hour, meaning because it may happen that he was mistaken in the hour of the day up to the 2 hours before the real accurate time, it may happen that event in reality happened at the end of the 4th hour, which means that is a distance of 2 hours window from the real event. So therefore, in order to make it invalid, you need to go further, exceeding more than that time measurement, which means the second pair needs to say that he is with them at the beginning of the 1st hour, which means that is 2 hours before the 3rd hour, which means that it has to say that he was with them between that time up to the 5th hour, which means there's 2 hours after the end of the 3rd hour. So it means that the witnesses of the exact time can end up by having a conspiring testimony. So now we understand, he said here, why? Because ובדינו דנייטיב לאו מעיקר התפי, אלא בין ימם הלילה אותה ראויים beautiful. Usually, if you look at the picture in a broader understanding is this. People make mistakes sometimes in our ear, here, and there. However, when you have a time of darkness and light, such as the difference between day and night, so if you talk about addition of hour to the 2 hours, which means 2 hours before the 2nd hours, etc., you now enter to an opportunity of a difference between day and night. And the general statement is, people are not making such a mistake between day and night. They can have a mistake in an hour here and there in a general domain, which is either day or night. But mixing between the two, it's a different story, and people not making those mistakes. So therefore, we go and we say, well, Rabbi Yehuda said that the person can make mistake even up to 3 hours. יהבין לנו מתחילת שעה ראשונה ועד סוף שישית. We give him a time frame of this witness that come and give us the idea of the 3rd hour, because Rashi said that Rabbi Yehuda can go up to 3 hours, which means you need to have in our account an option that the truth of the matter, that event happened up to the 3rd hour before meaning up to the end of the 2nd hour before the 3rd hour, which means that it's, if you count the day from the beginning of dawn, that's basically an hour before the beginning of the full daytime. So therefore, ובדינו דנייטיב להוא מעיקר התפי, so it means that you need to give them the benefit of doubt, which is you need to give them the time frame before the hour that they said, because of the first testimony. page 12b, Ela ben yemama lelelia lo tau inche. Back to our point that we said people are not making a mistake between the time measurement of day and time measurement of night. So it means that that witness that said that it is up to the third hour, he made a mistake more than 2 hours before the time that he mentioned originally in his witness, and therefore you give him the 4th, the 5th, and the 6th hours, which means that is the 3 hours after the third hour. Why? ובדינו דנייטיב כמי תפי, אלא שבחמש חמה במזרח ובשבע חמה במערב. So it's a simple. Since the time changed, and now it's no longer dark. Why? Because in a 5 hour of the day, the sun is in the east. In a 7 hour of the day, the sun is in the west. So the Gemarrah come to conclusion that no one confuses the morning with the afternoon. So therefore, there is a time frame you can give the person. None. Now, all of that discussion was basically in the Sanhedrin Sugya with the capital punishment. Now, here we juxtapose to our discussion, which is, תנן רבי מאיר אומר, אוכלים כל 5 ושורפים בתחילת 6. Rabbi Meir said the time measurement of getting rid of the chametz is as follows. This is Erev Pesach, this is the eve of Passover. You allowed to eat leavened bread up to what? 5th hour. Which means, how you measure, you have to remember that is a time frame, different time frame. We measure the day between the time of the dawn, the time of the sunset, and therefore you count the hours from that time. So if you speak about 5 hours, you go by the time from the beginning of the dawn to the 5th hour. So you said up to the 5th hour of the day, you can eat a special designated leaven that you have from the previous evening, from the previous night, that you put before making the search for chametz, correct?
Yeah.
Next, burning. What's the time of burning? Earliest time of the 6th hour. So just let's talk in just for our understanding in numbers. Let's say if the dawn is, for example, 5 in the morning. So according to Rabbi Meir, you're allowed to eat chametz up to 5 plus 5, which means up to 10 o'clock in the morning. Okay? Then the time of burning the chametz has to be from 10:01 and onward. But that's basically the hour to do it. Okay? רבי יהודה אומר, אוכלים כל 4 ותולים כל 5 ושורפים בתחילת 6. Rabbi Yehuda said, wait a second. You have to have a different category. There's a different prohibition of feeding your animals and for you to eat. It's a different category. So therefore, the time we have to have a boundaries here, because otherwise people will, sorry for the better language, but people mess up. Okay, people will not, if you give them such a frame of time, they always exceed it. Don't you know people that, I know a person that like to go to airport and being called in the microphone, you know, to be the last person in the boarding to go on a plane. There are people who like to come in the last second of the time when everybody is stressed out. There are people like that. So the minutes you go in that way, you have to put a little boundaries here. So he said, guess what? The time of eating, it's up to the 4th hour. And then the 5th hour, it's a gray area, which is you're not allowed to eat, but you're allowed to feed your animals at that time. And then, and you do not have also the obligation to burn it at that hour. So in other words, you can derive benefit from that, but you cannot eat it. That's the 5th hour. And then the time of burning it is the beginning of the 6th hours. So it means that both Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda agreed that the time of the prohibition of eating chametz in the eve of Pesach it's from the chatzot, from the middle of the day, to the hours that you count from the morning's time, which means they are all concerned about people mixing up the time. Remember, also as a side note, that at the Talmudic time it wasn't our advanced watch system or advanced electronic system that measurement of time in that fashion of seconds. Okay, so now we understand, and he said, therefore, according to Abaye, le-Abaye aliba de Rabbi Meir, דאמר אין אדם טועה ולא כלום ניקול כולה sheet. So we, if you follow that school of thinking, you should say that we should be allowed to eat chametz the entire 6 hours, which means up to the hour that is prohibited from the Torah. Remember, biblically speaking, the prohibition against eating leavened bread apply only from the chatzot, from the middle of the day, after the 6 hours of the day pass. So usually people do not mix up with the time measurement of the day. So why the rabbis put another boundary to go hour earlier? That's the way Rashi explains. Tosfot said you cannot say literally, the rabbi is speaking of the 5th hour of the day, because the time of burning the chametz has to be a time measurement before the time you're allowed to go and involve with preparation for Pesach and eating matzah. So therefore it has to be close to the end of the 6 hours, so it's enough time to burn it before middle of the day. But again, there's a lot of discussion what exactly apply to the 6 hours and how far you go with the 6 hours. In the best case scenario is the idea that a person should do it early enough in a 6 hour, not to reach the border. In Judaism, the time measurement is crucial, so not to exceed it more than that time. So back here, so we said לאביי אליבא דרבי מאיר דאמר אין אדם טועה ולא כלום ניחול כולה שיט ולאח לישנא נמי דאמר אדם טועה במשהו ניחול עד סוף שיט. So they said here, and according to that way, that that you said that Rabbi Meir said that a person make a mistake a little bit, so let him eat the chametz until just before the end of the 6 hours. So they said, "V'Abaye aliba de Rabbi Yehuda de'amar adam toeh b'chatzi shah." But the way that Abaye explained it, and he said that the person make a mistake in a half an hour, so he said, let him again eat chametz until the midpoint of the 6 hour. Nechul ad pag-aaral. So the other option that said that the people make a mistake by an hour plus a bit, let him eat until just before the end of the 5th hour. So what you see here, that what the rabbis tells us here, the whole assessment of time, a person make a mistake, it's incorrect. So Abaye said, Amar Abaye edut מסורה לזריזים, חמץ לכל מסור. Beautiful. He said you have to be practical. When you're talking about people that give a testimony over a case of murder, for example, people are very careful. People are scrupulous. People know that they are dealing with life of a person. The assumption the rabbis tells us is that people do not come to bother to go to all these very deep, scrupulous examination of a court if they are not really familiar of evaluation of daytime, of the because they knew the minute they are testify the front of the court, they're going to have a very deep investigation, and those experts who are in the court will not let them off the hook because it's a case of a capital punishment. So therefore the people who take the chance to go and being testified, they are careful to come and to give a testimony and to be accurate. Versus, unfortunately, when it's come to leavened bread in the eve of Passover, people are different. Not everyone is so familiar with the hours, with the time, and people who are not so familiar, they are very easily come to make a mistake. So, if it's come to the chametz, we are basically go by the concern that Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda has, that people mix up the hour and the time. ורבה אליבא דרבי מאיר, דאמר אדם טועה בשתי שעות חסר משהו, מתחילת 5 לא ניחול. So if you go by the Rava explanation that said that the way that Rabbi Meir understand, that said that a person make a mistake by 2 hours less a bit from the beginning of the 5th hour, let one no longer eat chametz, because afterward one could confuse the 5th hour with the 7th hour, so it's prohibited to eat leaven by the Torah law. So the Gemarrah said, 5 chama b'mizrach, 7 chama b'ma'arav. They said, come on, you know what, the 5th hour the sun is in the east, the 7th hour the sun is in the west, so people not confused between what? Morning and afternoon. So therefore Rashi said the reality is that the leaven, the chametz, is not prohibited up to the 7 hours when the sun is already in the west, and people not mix between the 5th and the 7 hours. So the Gemara asks, if that's the case, so if that's the case, so doing the 6 hour, let him eat 11 as well. So because one distinguishes between the 6 hour and the 7 hour, since the sun tends westward only doing the 7 hour. Amar Avada Barava, she Yoma Bekarneta. Avada Barava said in the 6 hour the day the sun stands in a meridian, which means that it's really the middle of the east and the west. So people, it's very hard for people to say clearly and exactly the exact they are not sure if it's the east and the west, it's a middle point. So if you allow him to eat leaven in the 6 hour, people will mix the 6 hour with the beginning of the 7 hour. ורבה אליבא דרבי יהודה, ואמר אדם טועה 3 שעות חסר משהו, that he said that the person can make a mistake by 3 hours less a bit. So now he said מתחילת 4 לא ניחול. We are forbidden to eat chametz also from the beginning of the 4th hour, which means, again, Rabbi Yehuda said that the people mix up the 3 hours between the 6th, 5th and the 4th hour before that. So the Gemarrah said you do not need to prohibit eating chametz from the 4th hour. Why? Because remember what Rabbi Yehuda said in regards to give witness, that people not mix between the 5th and the 7 hours. So therefore you can go that. Why? 5 chama b'mizrach, ו7 chama b'ma'arav. Remember what we said, the sun at the 5th hour is in the east, the 7 hours it's in the west. וכל שכן ו4. And for sure the 4th hour people not make a mistake between the 4 to the 7 hours. So they said יחי ב5 נמי נחול. So if that's the case, so if there is no concern that one confuse morning and afternoon, doing the 5th hour let him eat chametz leaven as well. So the answer is, they said תרגמה רבי אליבא דרבה, עדות מסורה לזריזים, חמץ לכל מסור. Back to our point that he said that people, when they need to bear testimony, they entrusted to be more vigilant, and therefore a witness is less likely to make a mistake. But the prohibition against eating leavened bread, it's different, and therefore according to Rabbi Yehuda, he said that people will not make mistake in between the 5th and the 7 hours but when it's come to the chametz, people make a mistake. So the big point is how far you're accepting mistakes. You know, between the 4th hour to the 7 hours, it's different than between the 3rd to the 5th hour. 4 to the 7 hours, you should not be concerned the same as because the 5th between the 3rd to the 5th hour, it's already turned to be 3 hours time measurement, and people not making mistakes in those hours, because again, between the 4th to the 7 hours, it's clear where's the sun. Remember, in those years, it wasn't a watch; you need to measure time by the sun. So 4 to 7 hours is such a distance that people not mistaken. So Verava Lava Inutama de Rabbi Yehuda. So there's no reason for the add of the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Why? Why Rabbi Yehuda making a boundary for eating chametz earlier? So he said the reason is because people not mistaken between the 5th to the 7 hours. Rabbi Yehuda letami de Amar. Rabbi Yehuda said, and I'm going to study it, God willing, at page 21. Ein biur chametz el asreifa. It's going to be a disputation how a person should get rid of chametz. So Rabbi Yehuda hold that the proper biur chametz, it can be performed. How you get rid of the leaven? Only by burning it. Very good. When the rabbis make the time of eating the leaven before the time of burning it, they give him a time, sha'a achat lilkot ba'etzim. So they give him a time to do what? To get a wood to burn the leaven. So it means that if he can eat chametz up to the 5th hour, he's not enough time, it's not sufficient time to collect, get a wood to prepare. So because the sages prohibited for the people from eating chametz at that hours, that prohibition give him a chance of a reminder, Rashi said, to burn the chametz in a proper time, in addition to the time that he have by prohibition of eating it. So they said, and again, you cannot juxtapose this discussion to the word of Rabbi Yehuda in regards to the testimony of capital punishment, because it's different. It's you cannot. It's a two different measurement of testimony. So Eitivei Ravina leRava, Amar Rabbi Yehuda ematai shelo bishat biuro. So he said, when there's a proper time to burn the chametz, specifically burning it, because there are other ways to get rid of that. For example, you spoil that, you put it in a toilet, you put it in a river. Okay? So it said, when a person wants to get the chametz before the time, such as, for example, doing the 6 hours, when it's by the Torah law, you're still allowed to eat chametz. So they said, אבל בשעת ביעורו השבתתו בכל דבר. But when it's come to the time to burn the chametz, so the removal of leaven may be performed in any manner. So a person doesn't need to look for wood for burning it. So that's the question. The question is, so why the rabbis need to provide him an hour to bring a wood? It happens that not every day the sun shining beautifully. There are cloudy days. So what happened in cloudy days? The person have a hard time to observe the precise position of the sun, and because they not observe the precise position of the sun, so therefore the people making mistakes. Why? The Tosfot Rabbeinu Peretz and Tosfot Shant said it's because most of the time the sky is not cloudy. But if it's come to a capital punishment, you have to be lenient. But here, when it's come to a Pesach, you have to be more scrupulous. So he said, if you are concerned about the cloudy day, so then you should go further, and even the 4th hour we shall not eat. Why? Because Rava hold that according to Rabbi Yehuda, a person make a mistake up to 3 hours when the sun is on one side of one side. So they said, Amar Rav Papa, Arba zman suda lakol hi. It says the 4th hour is a time for people to eat. So there are several points here. Number one, it's a book called Pri Yitzchak. He said in Chelek Aleph that the rabbinic decree, it applies specifically from the prohibition of eating in the 6 hours. It's not in regard to a burning. The 6 hour apply to specifically the prohibition of eating. But furthermore, when it's come to food, guess what? People know exactly the time of the meal, right? You know the rule. You feed them, they come. So the time of the meal, everyone knows. So therefore, we can depend that when it's come to leavened bread, people pay attention that the 4th hour, because they know that's the time of meal. If you notice, sometimes you have a program. So if you look at people, how they look at programs, first they look what time, when you have a symposium, when you have a convention, right? The first thing the people look is what time is the lunch, and what time is the dinner, and what time is the breakfast, and then they look at the topics, and then they look at the location where it's taking place, right? So I don't say everyone, there's always an exception, but anyway, so people pay attention that this is the 4th hour, is the time for the meal, and they don't mix that with the 7 hours. However, when you speak about the time for witnesses that give serious witnesses to record, you have to measure in the exact time. It's different. Maharam Chalawa is the one who said that also, that we have to clearly distinguish between people's measurement of time for meal to other time. So now we talk about meal and talk about food. So go further with that. When we said Tanu Rabbanan, שעה ראשונה מאכל לודים, שנייה מאכל ליסטים, שלישית מאכל יורשים, רביעית מאכל פועלים, חמישית מאכל תלמידי חכמים, שישית מאכל כל אדם. Oh la la. So they said as follows. The first hour is the morning, is the eating of the ludim, the member of the people who are cannibals, which means that the eating earlier possible, because that's the nature. It's just in a way euphemism, using a certain category to express people option of eating, how they behave. The second is the people who are basically listim, is like robbers. People they need to eat very earlier because they wake all night and they sleep at the 1st hour of the day, and they're eating at the 2nd day when they wake up. You see, the rabbi know the business. The third one is the food for people who inherited a lot of money, and they don't bother even when all this money accumulates, is nothing to do with them, so they don't bother to go out and make a living, and they can eat earlier than other people. Do you know anybody like that? It happens, I know. Anyway, the 4th is the people who are, how do you call it in our language? Blue collar, labor. The 5th is the Talmidei Chachamim, the Torah scholars. And the 6 hours is eating for all people, average people. You have to remember that this is Talmudic time. So the measurement of people and profession is a little different than our days. But we can derive from that a lot of things. So Amar Rav Papa, Revi'it, Zman Suda Lakoli. Rav Papa said that the 4th hour time of eating, it's for all. How come? Ela Eipuch. Revi'it Ma'achal Kol Adam, Chamishit Ma'achal Polim, Shishit Ma'achal Talmidei Chachamim. You have to go differently, and you have to say, since the blue collar employees, they depend upon the owner of the business, the manager. So they have to postpone the time of the food in 1 hour after everyone else. That's the pag-aaral said in Tractate Shabbat, page 10. Now, the Ha'amek She'ela, which is another great sage, he said that it has to be the opposite way. Anyway, so we concluded, Mikan va'elach kezorek even lacheimat. So eating from this point forward, it doesn't benefit. It's like one who throw a stone into a leather bottles, which means it's not any contribution to a person's health. So it's like they said it's like a person take a stone and put it on the place that they have wine, but it's not completed, it's not repleted with wine. So the wine come up and it looks like it's filled, but the truth of the matter, the measurement of the wine didn't change. So therefore, if you eat after the 6 hour, even it appears that it's good, the reality it's no good, but it's not damaging you. You see, the rabbis are familiar even with nutrition. Amar Abaye lo amaran elo l'taim mide mitzafra. That statement apply only if a person did not eat anything from the morning. But if he ate something in the morning, it's a different statement, which means if someone ate even a small measure earlier in the morning, so the whole system changed. So it means the person should measure time for the meals, so the body system will get to a certain measurement, and therefore it will be a healthy way of eating. Now we back to our discussion of the juxtaposition between capital punishment to the leaven. Amar Rav Ashi, kemachloket be'edut kach machloket bechametz. The same way that we have a disputation in regard to testimony. Remember the disputation between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda? So we can juxtapose that to the disputation in regard to leavened bread, which means the same way that we said Rabbi Yehuda hold that people can make a mistake in the measurement of the hour and the day, so the same apply to the eating of leavened bread, that concern that in the leavened bread people make more mistakes than a testimony of capital punishment. So they said, Pshita, we already said it, it's clear. Why Rashi said it? Hainu hach kamrinan, that's exactly what we said earlier, right? The resolution between the Tanaic disputation in two disputations. So the Gemara said, Hakamash melan, you derive from that, Shinuye deshaninan shinuyahu. So they said, the minutes that we make a change, the answer that we give, the answer, which means distinguishing between the cases of testimony and leaven, are legitimate answers. And we not say that there is different ruling in two cases. It's any reflection of the dispute between the Tanaim with regard to the opinion velo tema Tanai, between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. So it means in regards to leaven, Rabbi Meir talk about measurement of 1 hour, and Rabbi Yehuda talk about 2 hours. In regards to witnesses, the Mishnah and Sanhedrin agreed, follow Rabbi Meir, that he is concerned about 2 hours, and Rabbi Yehuda concerned about 3 hours. So the way that you reconcile the two different Mishnayot is to say that is a disputation what exactly Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda meant, and how far each of them have a measurement of time. Rav Ashi said that if it's come to leavened bread, it's less likely that people make a mistake, because at the beginning of the time it's prohibited, which is the 7 hours, the sun is still in the west, but people, the sages did not worry about such a small time measurement, and they take the precautions to make it earlier. Now, Later we explain that there are some days that it's a cloudy day. So if it's a cloudy day, so then people can make mistakes. But Amar Rav Shimi Bar Ashi, he wants to circumscribe the Mishnah in regard to witness, and he said, לא שנו אלא בשעות. אבל אחד אומר קודם הנצח מה, ואחד אומר אחד הנצח מה, עדותם בטלה. He says, guess what? If it's come to a different time in hours, that's fine. But if one witness talk about totally dark time, before dawn, another person talk after dawn, then it's all false testimony and you cannot accept it then. Because this is something that very unlikely that people make a mistake. So he said, pshita, that's obvious. אלא אחד אומר קודם הנצח אמר, ואחד אומר בתוך הנצח אמר עדותם בטלה. So even one said that it happened before sunrise, and the other one said that it occurred when? During the sunrise. So their testimony is void. So they said Hana Mepshita. It's also obvious. So they said maybe you say that both of them said, both the witness saying one thing. Vehadikama, and the one who said that this event happened and he witnessed, he said 13a בתוך הנצח אמר, and the incident occurred during the sunrise. He said בגילויה hava kites, because he was standing out in the open and there were a ray of light. So it's based on Rashi Ta'anit, page 3b, that said that that's the time that he was standing before the sunrise, before dawn. He imagined that he sees something and he basically mistook for sunrise. So he said, therefore, Kamashmanan, Rav Shimi Bar Ashi teach us that people, there is no concern that transpire in that matter, and therefore their witness is void. Now we're going to practical halachot. Rambam, Hilchot Edut, chapter 1. It's important, especially since one of our crowd is a private detective. The court asks all witnesses the 7 questions known as interrogation, Hakirot. Number 1. In which 7-year sabbatical cycle of the Jubilee did the incident occur? Then, in which year of the 7-year sabbatical years? In which month of the year? On which date of the month? On which day of the week? At which hour of the day? At which place did the incident occur? And then the interrogation and the examinations, we said, with regard, the Rambam said, this is again Sefer Shoftim, Hilchot Edut, chapter 1 and 2. With regard to the interrogation and basic scrutiny of witnesses, if one witness does not know the answer to even one of these questions, the testimony is void. On the contrary, with regard to examinations, even if neither witness is able to answer a particular question, the testimony is valid provided they do not contradict each other. Another important halacha we learn, it's in the decree due to the cloudy day, and we can derive a lot of halacha implication from that. So that's the Rambam Sefer Zmanim, Hilchot Chametz U'Matzah. One may not eat chametz, leaven, during the 5th hour on Passover Eve, lest people come to confuse the 5th and 6th hours on a cloudy day. However, this decree applies only to eating, not to the prohibition against deriving benefit from leaven at that time. Also, we have the Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim 157. We talk about Zman Seudah. The healthy meal time for an ordinary person is the 4 hour after the sunrise. And the last halacha of today, we talk about the difference between before sunrise and during sunrise. And again, this is Rambam, Sefer Shoftim Ilchot Edut, chapter 2. With regard to two witnesses who testified about an incident, and one of them says it occurred before sunrise, while the other says it took place during sunrise, their testimony is rejected. This is because the difference between their statements cannot be attributed to error, and therefore the accounts are considered contradictory testimonies.